Thank you. Good morning, everyone. You are in the panel, The Evolution of the Censorship Narrative, Challenges and Threats Facing Fact Checkers. I hope everyone's in the right place. Is it all right for me to get started? Yeah, great. Well, welcome everybody today. I'm Angie Drobnic Holan. I'm director of the International Fact-Checking Network, and I'm joined on this panel by some of our fact checkers and a fact-checking supporter from around the world. And we're here to talk about an extremely important issue, which is attacks on the press using the false guise of censorship. I'm sure it's not news to many of you that independent journalism in general has been under attack, and fact checkers specifically. And just to lay a basic premise out, I do think some of these attacks are because of the power and impact of our work. Fact-checking does work. It corrects false narratives, and it prevents lies from becoming entrenched in society. The International Fact-Checking Network started in 2015 when fact-checking organizations from around the world came together. These were fact-checkers like PolitiFact in the United States, Full Fact in the United Kingdom, Chequeado in Argentina, Maldita in Spain, and we realized that we were sharing common practices and methods of fact-checking political lies and internet hoaxes and conspiracy theories. We created a common set of standards that we call the Code of Principles. They revolve around accuracy, transparency, and fairness. And over the years, we've met once a year at our annual Global Fact conferences. And I have to give a plug. This year's Global Fact is in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, at the end of June. As fact-checking developed over these years, we started working with social media partners, most notably Meta and TikTok. Some of you probably saw the news that Meta was ending its partnership this year. We believe in the wake of political pressure from the Trump administration. We hope that Meta will reverse course because we do feel like this fact-checking program was very valuable to social media and had a positive impact. But we really do stand at a moment where fact checkers are navigating an increasingly complex landscape. So I will let our panelists introduce themselves and their organizations in detail, but I am here joined by Ed Bajs, CEO of Medan, Ana Brakos from Faktograf in Croatia. She's stepping in for Karen Rebello. Thank you, Ana, for joining us. And Taina Lone, founder of Aos Fatos in Brazil, and one of our conference partners for Global Fact. So let's just get right into it. Ed, I'd like to start with you. Would you briefly introduce Medan's history in the fact-checking ecosystem? And when did you first start noticing these attacks on fact-checking as censors start to gain power? And what forms did this attack initially take?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Angie. Really great to be here. The organization that I represent, Medan, has been working since the very early days of the social internet at the intersection of software development, collaboration, and essentially public sense-making on the internet. Our start in fact-checking actually preceded kind of the formal start of the IFCN and much of what we've come to know as misinformation work. So in 2011, we proposed a collaborative software platform for looking at the provenance, verifying and fact-checking claims on social media. And that first product was called Check Desk Now Check, and it was deployed for the 2012 Egyptian presidential election. So the notion was, hey, the internet's a big place. There's a lot of sources. there's a lot of content flowing around, and we probably need a good way to look at the veracity of claims and the trustworthiness of sources. So we began very early in the space. The predictable and hypocritical censorship narrative we saw surface kind of circa 2016. We saw it surface aggressively and formally in receiving letters from the House Judiciary Committee accusing us of violating Americans' First Amendment rights for putting out on our platform fact checks that urged people not to drink bleach. So this is the absurdity of the pursuit, and unfortunately, it's been very effective. So I'll leave it at that. But
yeah, and the attack tends to have two prongs. It's one, if you're fact-checking me, if you're contradicting me, you're censoring me, which I think any of us could recognize as false on its face. And then the other attack is, if social media companies are moderating our content, you're censoring me.
yeah,
And we would also argue against that point as well.
yeah, absolutely. I'll leave my remarks at
Okay.
that. But yeah.
Anna, tell us about your start in fact-checking in Croatia with Faktograf and how you saw this narrative come about. And I'm curious your thoughts on whether you think this was a homegrown attack or if it was people imitating attacks in other places.
Hi everyone. Thank you for pulling me off the bench to replace Karen. And for the audience, if we don't impress you, I hope the venue is impressive enough, so that's, you at least have that. So my name is Anna Brakos. I am the executive director of an organization called Faktograf based in Croatia. I'm also a member of the governance body of the European Fact-Checking Standards Network. We decided to make it a tongue twister, so you all remember it when you try and play games while drinking. So the thing that sort of bothers me, if I can get a little bit personal, is that my New Year's wish, actually, it didn't come true. My colleagues from the European network already know this, but my wish for 2025 was for me to talk less about harassment, censorship, and stuff like that, and talk a bit more about the good journalism that we do at Faktograf, some other initiatives, ideas that we are trying to kind of bring to reality. But sadly, it seems that sycophantism is contagious. And the events that have occurred in the US have brought the levels of harassment and have brought this narrative of so-called censorship to a completely new level. And we have our tech bros to say thanks for that. Why did we start dealing with this in Croatia a few years back? One of the reasons was during the pandemic, the amount of threats and hate and violence that we were exposed to was almost surreal. And I wanted to know, and we wanted to know, is this something that's happening just to us, or is this some type of coordinated action happening elsewhere? We specifically focused on Europe since we're based in Europe, and we did this huge survey, actually a research project on how many fact checkers are actually getting harassed, who is harassing them, and why. And some of our hypotheses were that the attacks that we are facing are coordinated. The intention behind them is to not only disrespect our work, but the idea is to sow mistrust, it's to create division, usually to achieve your own political goals. The thing that certain politicians don't like to hear is that we notice that especially and specifically from one end of the political spectrum. And that is something that we see almost everywhere. So the idea that we are censoring is something that is for them just a very good talking point. And I think we sometimes try to approach it as if it were something different. I would also like to make a point and then conclude on this very long first answer that what we try to differentiate every time is who are the instigators and who are the followers. In many, many cases, people that are following that approach have very real problems. They have very real, difficult situations in their lives, and they're looking for a solution. If the only people that are offering you a solution are people that are telling you lies, you will follow them. I think we live in a very strange time where the far right, or call it whatever you want, is offering this gloomy, dark, very combative vision of the future. But at least it's a vision of a future. And the complete kind of the non-existent, naive or utopian vision, something different that you can hope for, that should come from other political actors, it's not there. And so that vacuum is being filled up with lies, and it's being filled up with hate in order to make short-term political gain, or if you're a tech bro running a huge company, in order to increase your profit margins.
Thanks, Ana. Now, I want to go to Ty in Brazil. And I will say, I think the typical experience of fact checkers facing these attacks and harassment are internet insults, threatening or harassing emails. Sometimes on a platform like X, there'll be organized attacks where everyone will tweet at you and say insulting things. But in Brazil, things went to a new and frankly very alarming level. And Ty, I'd like you to take a little bit of time and walk us all through. I mean, I don't think everyone here knows a whole lot about the Brazilian political situation, but just walk us through what Aos Fatos and some of the other organizations faced in Brazil.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Taina Alon, Executive Director of Aos Fatos in Brazil. Aos Fatos is an almost 10-year-old organization that started as a fact-checking organization, but has become some sort of disinformation watchdog that is very tech-driven, that promotes solutions based on AI, automation, to tackle disinformation and misinformation and other tactics that, in a certain way, make the digital ecosystem dangerous or, well, harmful. So Aos Fatos was founded in 2015 as a project to verify politicians' statements. The basic traditional fact-checking that we all knew at the time that was supposed to keep politicians accountable. But it became an actual target in 2018, during the 2018 elections, actually a little before the 2018 elections, because it was when Meta partnered with fact-checkers in Brazil to basically verify hoaxes and other types of misinformations inside Facebook then. That was the first time we received threats, mainly via Twitter and Facebook, and faced a coordinated hate campaign from conservative websites that even back then labeled fact-checking on Facebook as censorship. So it's important to keep in mind that the same movements that campaigned on social media for Bolsonaro in 2018 became so radicalized that they formed diverse groups with specific agendas. They formed groups of anti-vaxxers. They formed groups of climate denialists, anti-woke movements, very conservative ones, ultimately evolving into a kind of militaristic nationalism that was weaponized by Bolsonaro's agenda and was heavily exploited during the pandemic in Brazil in the years that followed. So in fact, the groups that accused and still accuse fact-checkers in Brazil of censorship, of being censors on social media or being censors of top politicians, they were the same ones calling for a military intervention during the past years, and then actually attacked in January 8th the Praça dos Três Poderes, the Three Power Plaza in Brasília, Brazil, just like 2 years before the same kinds of movements did in the US. But regarding this surveillance specific, during the investigation to the involvement of Bolsonaro on those, stimulating those attacks during the January 8 attempted coup, we discovered that Aos Fatos had been spied by the Brazilian government during some time that we are not sure about when. We don't fully understand the extent of this surveillance, actually, because the investigation is under judicial secrecy. And we requested access to part of the inquiry, but were denied. So we don't have the full scope of the invasion that we had. I mean, we don't know if cell phones were targeted. We don't know if our office was targeted physically. The complaint received by the Attorney General's office, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned the use of the Pegasus spyware with some journalists in Brazil. They didn't state directly if journalists at Aos Fatos were under surveillance from the Pegasus spyware. But what became clear was that within the government, there were individuals that were informally assigned, since it was a clandestine operation, to monitor Aos Fatos and other fact-checkers on social media and seek out data to expose us. So, for instance, one event that happened was they made up a dossier with personal information about Aos Fatos journalists and circulated on social media like WhatsApp, Telegram, targeting family members and alleged associations to political parties that were basically false. So, of course, this creates a sense of deep insecurity, and for the long term, it kinds of promotes things that we all, as journalists, know about self-censorship, this sense of having to protect the team, making choices about security or how an investigation might be conducted. So yes, it gives us a sense of almost a paranoia, actually, because we don't know the extent of the surveillance at the end.
Yeah, I think whenever we're talking about the government surveillance of journalists, we're in some very serious territory. Like, this goes far beyond just internet insults and harassment. Ed, I want to come back to you. One of the things that's so frustrating about these kinds of attacks is that they're so Orwellian. It's like we're doing independent accountability journalism, and they say it's censorship. Just similar, and we've seen this happen in other areas where it seems like words change meaning and shift. So it's very difficult to argue against it, but one of the things that I've tried to do in my public comments and in my work is to emphasize over and over again, fact-checking is not censorship. Fact-checking adds to the conversation. It doesn't take away from it. And yet, I think some of these tech platforms have been very artful at putting blame onto the fact-checkers themselves when it's their program. How do you see the relationship between fact-checking and the tech platforms right now?
Yeah, it's the relationship is fraught. Fact checkers are being thrown under the bus, as it were. The morning that I woke up and scrolled my phone and saw Zuckerberg's message, famously delivered with the, I think it was $800,000 wristwatch for added effect. I thought it was a deep fake. I thought, oh, somebody's, this is clever, this is good. Okay, this is, certainly he's not gonna be this cynical. And pretty quickly, I, opened up my messages and did what good fact checkers do, and checked sources, and it's like, oh my God, this is complete capitulation, which through the lens of, a business argument is totally understandable. And, I think we need to remind ourselves that the fact-checking ecosystem, as we know it, the modern fact-checking ecosystem was built to respond to this situation we have with a, 7 billion mobile device world and decentralized methods and modes of production and distribution that require that we have something that is a responsive journalist. This is responsive internet journalism. It's critically necessary, and it's not. It should be the work of the platforms that are making, multi-billion-dollar profits to support this ecosystem. And that's what they did for a period of 6 years or so. And they've supported the ecosystem to the, extent of hundreds of millions of dollars flowing in to create this new ecosystem of responsive journalism. And more than the money, or equal to the money, is the fact that these platforms were placing the content. And this is a critically important fact. They're placing the content on surfaces, either as a related story or, in a best case scenario, a flag. But that was part of the effectiveness of, or is part of the effectiveness of the ecosystem. So it takes the platform's money and the platform's goodwill to really make these programs work. And now we have seen, the totally cynical capitulation, kowtowing to an administration that is openly vindictive. And so what we have here is a problem with an evolved form of democracy, which has put hands into the power of a very vindictive administration that is saying, okay, you want monopoly regulation, you want us to stand back while DSA comes for your lunch, you want us to, do the things that we can do to make your life miserable, or will you line up behind me for some photo ops while I get my, 47th presidential inauguration, and are you going to, serve my purposes? And so I think it is important that we speak the truth of what's going on, and not say, oh, this is harassment and censorship because we're telling the truth. This is a political move that the largest corporations in the world, who basically have a monopoly on our knowledge infrastructures, are making to gain the favor of a person who's wielding democracy in really, really destructive ways.
I mean, one of the things that's so frustrating to me is that whenever there are public surveys, people say they want the tech platforms to moderate content. They do not want to go into this free-for-all in these online spaces where they have to fact-check everything for themselves. They want to have a positive user experience. And I do think there will be a pendulum swing back at some point, but we're not there. Anna, tell us about the EU regulations. I mean, I think a lot of us outside the EU maybe see more hope in the EU regulations.
I will, but I like Ed's question a bit better. So give me just maybe a minute or two on the question Ed got, and then I'll get to the very exciting part of regulation. So I've heard the numbers that you've said now, and I think the numbers of the so-called investment in journalism or in fact-checking it's been something that the platforms have been talking about for a very, very long time. I honestly don't see it as an investment. It's not an investment in journalism. It's not an investment in fact-checking. It's for them. It's mostly been a PR exercise in trying to mitigate some of the damage that was, and more importantly, is still being done everywhere in the world. In my opinion, I don't know, Mark is special. And what Mark wanted to see is big thank yous, big pats on the back, big kind of, you know, oh my God, you're so great, thank you for helping us. But that's not how the program started. The program started because they did a lot of terrible things in a lot of places, most importantly because of the Cambridge Analytica, excuse my French, shitstorm that they faced. So they needed to do something about that. And sadly, that situation was worth more in their minds than genocides that they helped instigate or other violent situations that happened because of the ways that platforms are being run. So that's one thing. I would say that the administration is one part. The other part is that they saw all of us as being ungrateful for the support they were offering us. And the way I see it, the minimum you can do is, if you have platforms, and I'm not talking just about Meta, this is Google, YouTube, I don't want to get into that at all. TikTok, whole different story. Like, if you have those platforms, if you know that people use those platforms to do harm for other people, it is your responsibility to help fix that, whether it's working with us, whether it's creating a better system. So now let's try to connect that to EU regulation. So what the EU is trying to do is make up some type of regulation that is going to make them do that, at least in the EU. And for years and years and years, the idea was, let's sit down at the table, let's talk, let's have this wonderful dialogue, and then we are going to explain to you what European values are, and you, huge corporations, are going to say, sure. Of course, that didn't happen, because they are the bosses in prolonging negotiations, over-promising, under-delivering, saying yes to things that when the EU has no way to actually pressure you into doing something, they're great at that. And I think all of us know that. What's the other thing with the EU? The EU, in my opinion, is pretty good at setting up regulation. It does pretty poorly in implementation, especially in certain countries. And the other part, which I don't think really helps them a lot, is there's a lot of talk about European values and what we or they stand for. But then you look over to Georgia, or you look over to Serbia, and you look over to places where people still believe in EU institutions and see it as something that can better their lives. And sadly, most of the time, they're left to fend for themselves. So not to make this completely gloomy, I think it's good that the regulation is there. Sadly, it's now become a part of a trade war that's happening everywhere around us. I hope that the regulation that was made is going to survive, that they are actually going to implement it, and that they are not going to get scared. Because like what we try to do at Factograph is to have fact-checking as one of the sections on our site, or as one of the parts of our work. What we want to understand and what we want to tell our audiences about are the underlying issues. Why are people so susceptible to disinformation? And one of the reasons why is because the system is broken on so many levels. And talking about values and making regulation that then you're gonna turn your back on and not implement, it's not the solution. So I think more courage is something that we all need, especially people sitting in positions of power in EU institutions.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. I totally agree. Ty, we were talking before the session about the relationship between fact-checking and democracy. Listening to this conversation, like, what are your thoughts about this fracturing of truth and these attacks on fact-checkers as attacks on democracy itself?
I actually wanted to bring back the censorship theme, because I think it has to do with the same weaponization of other expressions that we've seen from the past years. Censorship is one of them, free speech is another. So these basic rights that are a symbol of democracy that have been captured by those groups which are completely anti-democratic. So in Brazil, for instance, the radicalization of these individuals that show that they genuinely believe that there's a dictatorship of the Supreme Court in Brazil currently, just as they believe in the existence of a communist leftist project that advocates for gender and racial equality. And these people live completely disconnected from factual truth, and do not share the same belief system as you, us, all of us together, that we conventionally call journalism. Bolsonaro supporters, in their view there, but not only Bolsonaro supporters, military supporters, authoritarian groups that are even in a fringe further than Bolsonaro, would come to the system Bolsonaro advocates for would come to liberate them from the supposed oppression. That fact-checkers are a highly visible expression of that. Because if they mobilize digitally, and fact-checkers are there to contradict them, then we are enemies. And if it doesn't provide value for WhatsApp, Telegram, X, then we are a liability. So I think that, for me, it's quite clear that fact-checking will not reach radicals. I think the main purpose of fact-checking is not to convince people about radicalism if that's wrong. It's basically inform people and make them make their own choices. And we have to admit that, well, if we don't agree with their choices, it's also democracy. What I believe is that fact-checking is a staple of democracy and is respected for those who understand what democracy is. Fact-checking dismantle narratives that, for example, target the election system. It is essential that fact-checking focuses on debunking and creating efficient systems of distribution. Narratives that must not be left vulnerable. If we reach to a point where lies about the validity of our democratic institutions, like elections, are enough to topple the entire democratic system, we will be in serious trouble. So just to make one example of that, in the investigations that conducted by a parliamentary commission in Brazil in 2023 about the January 8 attacks, Aos Fatos fact checks were mentioned over 20 times in the final report. That's journalism that makes an impact, and that's something that we should talk about more, about the impact that our journalism does. Community notes won't be part of holding the powerful accountable in that sense, at the same sense that fact checkers were pivotal and very decisive in Brazilians' investigations. So I truly believe, and I still believe that partnerships with platforms are something that might be advocated. They distribute content, so we have to be there. But I also believe that fact-checking plays a role in real-life issues such as investigating online scams, fraud, data theft, and other things that are quite familiar to us, because disinformation plays a role in such things as well. And it's really real-life based. So I think that we have to keep it mundane mostly, and not be what they want us to be, or they call us as arbiters of truth. Because journalism is not about truth, it's about facts.
We do have time to take some questions from the audience. We have staff members here with microphones, so please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and they'll bring you the microphone. Before we'll let you collect your thoughts for a minute. Ed and Anna, what do you see as these main points of democracy and fact-checking? When I started in fact-checking, I didn't think much about it. Now I've come to believe they're deeply interrelated, and we do need to talk about our impact more, because when we have common facts, we can come together as a society to discuss societal problems and solutions. If we don't have facts, we never get to that point. How are you seeing it?
Yeah, I think that, democracy is premised on the idea that society can, through exercising votes, arrive at collective decision-making. And whether that's a decision to proxy judgments about how to govern a society to an individual, or votes on specific referendums, the idea is essentially that you have a vote that is based on an informed view of a person or a referendum. And if we dismantle the fact-checking ecosystem, which is part of dismantling the journalistic ecosystem, then it's a matter of who's more charismatic and compelling in lying their way into office. And we know that the infrastructures we have for distributing knowledge now reward content that is more attention-worthy, and content that tends not to be bounded by a set of real things and facts is going to gain more attention. So we have a really bad reinforcing loop here that leads to a form of democracy that's going to make really bad decisions.
Well, I think it depends what your starting kind of point was. For us, the connection between the work that we do and the effectiveness of our institutions or what they represent has been it's a place where we started from. And I've said it many times over the last couple of months. In a very weird way, this type of crisis situation for people at Factograph, for my team, it's so well known that sadly we know better how to operate in this environment than we know how to operate when things are normal. I don't know what that even is. I think there are a lot of people in so-called developed democracies that are very surprised with this, and they're facing a lot of new things and new events. Their trust in institutions is kind of falling. They're realizing that regulation or laws or rights that took decades to develop are something that can be dismantled in a matter of minutes, which is something that I think has been it's been a fact in many parts of the world before. It's happened before. And sometimes I get a little bit angry when I, for some reason, listen to podcasts about the politics in the US. And when some, like really good journalists are like, we don't know what's going to happen now. Like, what's his next move? I don't know. Look at any other autocracy in the world. And it's like he's following a playbook that's, it happened already. But a friend recently called me a pragmatic enthusiast. So that's how, so this is how that I don't know, quality or character flaw plays out in my mind. Democracy is under threat. Everything is falling apart. Great. Why? Because the things that we do become important when, even more important, when there's a huge crisis happening. We know that from our work, for example, from the COVID situation. I think every fact checker, almost every journalist here, can say that when that first started happening, people were desperately looking for relevant, verified information. And that is going to happen again. The issue that we have is, how do we survive to provide that to people when the idea of this new world order is to destroy us? So you don't have that verified information to make informed decisions, to continue, hopefully, in creating a brighter world. The only thing I know how is that people have to stick together. If we start cannibalizing each other and killing each other over, not even like breadcrumbs that have fallen of some donors or funders' table, that is going to be very bad for all of us.
Yeah. Questions from the audience. I see hands up already. Can you bring the microphone over there?
Thank you so much for the panel. It was very insightful. Anna, you mentioned in the beginning that we have to differentiate between the instigators versus the followers. And I think right now it's especially clear when we look at, high-profile politicians, public figures, versus people on social media who perhaps fall for the narratives, amplify them. I wonder, given the recent political events in the US and also the wave of disinformation that's going on in Europe, how do you see the role of fact-checkers, both you and the other panelists as well, given this distinction, instigators versus followers? How do we address this? Thank you.
Well, look, I don't want to sign like a fortune cookie, but the thing with me, which sometimes I don't think people get, because I say harsh words in a almost offensive way, but I actually think that the only key here is empathy, nothing else. If you approach your audiences, citizens, people that are surrounding you, exclusively with I don't know, like almost disgust, we're not going to solve anything. It's very hard to be that type of bigger person when, in our case, you're constantly getting harassed, you're getting sued. I recently got an envelope in which somebody sent me a used piece of toilet paper. And I'm sitting here on a stage and telling you, like, that person, they're not well. They need help. There's something seriously wrong in their environment. They need, I don't know, a doctor, a lawyer, a job. I don't know what they need. But they're blaming me for things that are not in my control. They're in their control. So the only thing I think we can do is figure out ways how to get closer to people and convey a message that even though I think individual responsibility is a big deal, you are responsible for your actions. You can't blame everything on the universe. You are responsible for your actions, but you're not responsible on your own to fix the system. So I think the only solution we can do is get closer to audiences, figure out new ways that they can correspond with our content, and make sure that the stuff we are doing is something that is useful for them. We've we've tried out multiple ways that people can reach out to us, send us their questions, tell us what's important to them. So we make sure that the journalism that we do is in the service of the public. And I think that's the only way, that you can do it.
Another question?
Good morning. Thank you for the insights you have given us. My name is Stefan Voss. I work for the German news agency Deutsche Presseagentur. We started publishing fact checks more than 10 years ago, and we still have quite a big team of fact checkers. But we might also be affected if Meta withdraws also from the European market. Anna, you mentioned it being a pragmatic optimist. When my team sent me to Perugia, they said, bring some optimistic thoughts back, please. So I would be also interested in Ed's or Tao's thoughts as well. Hearing all these negative news, main sponsors withdrawing from the fact-checking market, where do you see, like, say, at least signs of optimism or new ways to finance a verification, or let's keep it broader, fact-checking or broader verification ecosystem? Do you see any signs at the moment to achieve that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's all answer that one. Anna, do you want to go? I can.
No, you go first.
Well, I think it is a moment for courage. I mean, clearly, like, I think when I look at the whole time period of fact-checking that I've been involved in, this is not a great moment, and I think we need to be frank about that. But having said that, we have a lot of assets at our disposal to fight for truth. The first thing is that many of our organizations are now mature. We know how to do this work. When we can bring the resources to it, we're highly effective. We've developed professional networks through the IFCN and through the EFCSN and through regional networks around the world. We're not alone. I think this is a time to collaborate and to support each other as much as possible. And then I think we really need to look to the public. I mean, I see survey after survey that the public wants truth. They do not appreciate these lies. And I think that we need to also build cross-cultural collaborations. I mean, I think that with knowledge institutions generally under attack, it's time for us to reach out and support each other. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying the positives are we know how to do this work, and we have a network of support. We need to draw on that network and get through a tough time right now.
I'll maybe jump in with some geeky optimism. I think that if your organization's been doing fact-checking for 10 years, you have an archive of some really valuable data. I think for all of the media organizations in this room, let's do our best in this next platform revolution to not make the same Faustian bargains that we've made with platforms who turn around and toss us under the bus. So think about how you leverage those data assets. At Medan, we are working on technologies that allow journalists to do work over messaging platforms, informing local chatbots with the data that you've been producing is a way of building new audience through messaging, is a way of thinking about, you know, this fundamental workflow of fact-checking is we've got a question or a link or an image, and as a user, I want to invoke a journalist to help me understand this. I think that that's a really hopeful next view of journalism as a service, and I think it is using some of the same workflows, some of the same algorithms that Andrew and his team have been working on and our team have been working on, and it's a model for new journalism that gets fact checks into, you know, an audience in lieu of having a willing and well-intentioned partner in the platforms.
I'll be very quick. I think I'm mostly inspired by the venue. I don't think we've bended the knee, which is which is pretty important. I think when you bend your knees, it's much easier to cut off your head. So the optimism that I see is that people have not backed down in our little community and are fighting like hell to make the work matter and to get something good out of all of this. I hope that's optimistic enough for you, Stefan.
I'd also like to second add that as well we are discussing that in the journalism industry as a whole, but in fact-checking specifically, personalization through AI, LLMs. I know it's not a big feast, but it's something that we might reach to many people more accurately, more objectively, and in a more empathetic way, as Anna said. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ed, Anna, and Ty, and thank you to the International
Angie. Thanks,
Journalism
everyone.
Festival.